Boom, we are alive, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to be taking a look at Bitcoin's price, where I think we're headed. We're going to also look at Link, Fetch, S&P 500, and make some conjecture about the US national debt and why I think selling Bitcoin is just not a smart idea. Okay, so actually we're going to start with US debt clock. $33 trillion of US national debt and growing by the second. This is very important, and we're going to go over why that's important, but we're going to start all the way back here. So this is Bitcoin on the weekly and in log. So if you will remember back here, or if you don't, or if you weren't here, all the way back in 2018 and 19, right before we had the run up to around 13,000, there's a significant amount of supply that came into the market at that time. Now, if you're in our private group, one of the things we've been talking about for the last few months is excess deaths, excess mortality, and the reason why when there's blood in the streets like that, it's actually insanely bullish. Now, one of the most difficult parts is always to find something negative, like at the beginning of the pandemic, and go, hey, people's lives are being ruined, things aren't going well, there's war, whatever it might be. This is actually a moment to be bullish. You almost have to be able to put on a hat that goes, hey, screw everybody else. This is a great time to be buying assets. So in the private group, we've been talking about this move up to around $40,000 for almost the last 4 months. This is how many days this is exactly. 336 days. Okay, sorry. Almost a year. Now, back in November here, December, was the breakdown of FTX, which generally marked blood in the streets for this sector entirely, and it basically marked almost the perfect bottom and spring. Now, springs are usually found in this particular moment. Springs are found in stressful situations, either for the market or for the globe as a whole. For Bitcoin last time, one of the previous springs we had looked at was right here on March 11th, right at the beginning of the pandemic. Now, I wanted to point this out because it's important to recognize that there was a secondary trading range that took place, an accumulation range that took place between May and April of 2019 and October of 2020, effectively. So this moment, the day that the pandemic was officially declared, was the day to go as long as possible. So almost the same thing happened this time, except instead of a pandemic, it was Sam Bankman-Fried's fuck up. At the beginning of that was the time to basically go long. Now, I think we're going to probably run up to around 40,000, 38,000 before we hit some serious resistance. Now, one of the things I think that's important to kind of check here is what's the trading range that takes place. So I suspect that what we're going to get is a larger trading range. It brings us up to around 40 grand, puts us back down to 21,000, and then we do something like this into the halving and then go ballistic, basically. So at this point, I don't feel there's a real reason to sell any of your Bitcoin. You know, even if there's a price change, let's say it goes to 40 grand and comes to 21,000, why would you want to go back into the US dollar when we know how much problems there are in the US system right now? They're trying to fight wars on a multiple front. Their civil internal unrest is increasing. Apparently, you've got a $3,800 debt per citizen. I think it's probably higher than that. So if we know that there's so many problems with the dollar, why would trading your Bitcoin for the dollar just doesn't make much sense, whether it's Tether or something. The amount that you're going to gain versus the speed at which Bitcoin's price is going to increase over the next 2 years is just going to be astronomical. It's going to be so hard for the average person to hold on long enough. So just keep consistency of accumulation. You know, I don't think you should be playing with leverage. It's a great way to lose money. It's much easier to look at investing almost like a bill and go, here's how much I can invest every month, and then just do that. Just invest every month, make it simple on yourself. For most people, it's better. You might be a rock mason. There's no need for you to all of a sudden become a trader, because you can be a rock mason and make investing very easy for you, which is if we know that there's peak moments of fear, such as there was back here in November or in the beginning of the pandemic. And interestingly enough, this peak moment of fear, this final LPS that we have been looking at, was highlighted by two significant wars, effectively. So this next potential movement into war, what does it do? It equals a bullish movement. Again, this is probably one of the hardest ideas of, hey, when there's blood in the streets, this is This is, see, I always thought this was like, oh, figuratively, like when Sam screws up FTX, but it is also a literal statement. So when people are dying in the streets, it's time to go long. And it's a little bit sociopathic to think that way, but you need to be able to put your sociopathic market hat on and go, hey, people are dying. Let's start buying assets. So I also want to take a look at Link here as well. Oh, let's go back. Yeah, there we go. So we had been watching this in the private group as well. There's this beautiful long-term accumulation range that have been taking place. 528 days of accumulation for Link, staying perfectly within this box. This is a massive change of character that we've just seen to move outside of the box to begin with. So 520 days of all inside the box trading, and then all of a sudden, the first move outside of the box. And if you've been studying the Wyckoff method and you've read all of our private documents, or even what you can just find online for free, you will know that after the spring, the first change of character is an extremely bullish sentiment. As a matter of fact, let's kind of share and reverse back in time and history for one more moment here and take a look at Ethereum. So here's Ethereum also on the weekly, and you can see Ethereum inside a very nice accumulation range. But more importantly, what I want to do is look all the way back here, back to that 2020 sentiment when the pandemic began, and note the long-term accumulation range that Ethereum had been in here. So Ethereum had been in a very tight box for around 400 to 500 days, very similar to what we saw with Link. And this first big change of character outside of the box, that marked a very confident state. You can actually go back and look at our videos very specifically where this $340 area, this was a time to be as invested as you could be, basically. This was a shift in the change of let's just buy monthly and put even more assets into, because we've seen the spring of the pandemic and we've seen consistent accumulation to push us outside of the box. No ability to return below the box, even with a significant amount of volume coming in. And you know what happened afterwards, a very easy 10x, where we went from approximately $380 all the way up, way up here, all the way to $4,500. So that moment in September was basically unnoticeable. So if we look at Ethereum again here and recognize that we are in an accumulation range. It's shorter than the previous one. No, it's actually not true. 680 days of accumulation for Ethereum as well. So basically the equivalent amount of time for the box to take place. Our spring happening on November 20th, November 11th, the exact day that Sam screwed everybody over. The movement about to take us outside of the box. So back at the trading range here for Ethereum, we can see that the likelihood now is a movement outside of the top of the box, a close here, something like this, usually a small short reaccumulation range, and then we could be seeing new highs. Now this is in contrast. Again, I just want to show a few of these because I think the big change of character is about to happen in multiple spots in the market. So we've been big fans of Fetch. We think the AI, API, crypto narrative is very, very strong. There's a real reason to believe that in the future, AI will have a lot of importance for booking flights, hotels, pretty much all business. So if you can have AI talking and verifying data with crypto, which is essentially what Fetch is trying to do, then there's a very strong narrative here. And from the previous accumulation range, we jumped up almost 600%. And now with Fetch, we've been in a nice, very tight box again for 175 days and just started to peak above the top of the box. So over the next 2 weeks, what we'll be looking for is something very similar to what we just showed you with Ethereum after this previous accumulation range. Let's put this back on the screen here. Back here, we'll take a look at the charts we have not touched since 2020, just because I felt it was, for posterity's sake, so important. We moved outside of the box, accumulated above the box in the trading range, and then moved out into basically a new bull market. Here, again, with Fetch, with Link, with Ethereum, the same thing appears to be happening. We've seen a change of character, what appears to be a move outside of the box, and then the accumulation range is what we're looking for afterwards. Now, this is in spite of the fact that, again, if you're in the private group, you will have recognized we've been following this long-term channel. we were concerned that we would break below this, and this would actually shift in Bitcoin's price too. But we have the opposite effect taking place. We have a break below the long-term trend line, yet movements up in Bitcoin. This is a very significant, not just change in character for Bitcoin, Link, Fetch, Ethereum, and many others, but it's a change of character in the relationship between Bitcoin and the S&P 500. One of the reasons why I think this is so valuable to understand is that Bitcoin is across all borders, across all boundaries. If you live in the Philippines, you can't just go buy $10 of the S&P 500. You're regulated outside of being able to do that. In fact, most places in the world, you can't just go buy the S&P 500 because you've been regulated out of it. Now, if you're an American citizen, even if you want to go buy stocks, you have to have X amount of dollars to play around with, although I believe maybe Robinhood has changed how much money you need to play around with. But even still, with Robinhood being in there, the S&P 500 has started to break down. It is not a global entity. It is not decentralized. And although it is some of the companies, like the biggest companies in the United States, the problem here is that doesn't really matter because we're dealing with the U.S. debt clock, which is just ticking into a worse and worse state by the second. So overall, I think trading your Bitcoin for dollars is a silly move. Even if we go to 40,000 and come back down to 25,000 in this next period, highlighting, again, a big change of character for Bitcoin, which we've already seen, a big move outside of the box, that long-term trading range of not being able to return back into the previous range, which we've been following down here, the likely move to $50,000 is $40,000 to $50,000 is very high. But again, we could see a reaccumulation take place here. But it's important to note that the amount of supply coming in right now to push the price up is very low. If you look at the supply signature that came in on the primary support in the spring and the test, and even all the way to the spring back here in 2020, this is a huge change. So just I'll point these out one more time here. Spring, and look at the volume signature, primary support, volume signature, selling climax, primary volume signature. These are all significantly higher. Now, we are very oversold on the daily, but on the weekly, we are just about to peak up. And even back here in 2019, we broke significantly above the RSI and the oversold on the weekly. So we haven't seen an oversold on the weekly yet. I suspect once we get up to 40,000, we're going to see that oversell on the weekly, and then we're going to come back down and test this secondary range that we had built. Something kind of similar to what we had seen again here back in 2020, where we had this nice run up to 13,000, a retest of the 3,500, and then basically the start of a new bull market. So I don't believe this moment is the start of the new bull market, but it could be. So there's no reason to like, oh, it's at 40 grand, I should sell. Just stay consistent and keep buying over the long term. It's going to do so much better for you. So just from peak to breakout, 1,000 days for Bitcoin on the previous total cycle accumulation, and from peak to where we are now, 900 days. So there's no reason to think that we might not just go from 40,000 up to 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, $100,000. That could happen, and you would feel so stupid to have sold your Bitcoin for 40 grand when it then just doubles afterwards. There is no reason to think that the US economy is going to recover. If you've been following our channel for quite some time now, one of the other things that is extremely worrying, around the world, you have massive quarterly excess mortality in places like Singapore for Q2 of 2023, 30% higher than the 5-year rolling average, 30%, 7% in Qatar, 14% in Thailand. This is a massive amount of mortality. And just again, the hard part here is to remember when there's blood in the streets and people are dying, it is a time to be bullish. And I have never seen so much blood in the streets before. This, in fact, there are more people dying right now just from whatever random cause. I mean, I'll leave it up to you guys to come up to your own conclusion about what may be causing this excess mortality, because I'm just a stupid YouTuber. But hey, when there's blood in the streets, you should be long. Not using leverage, but just consistently trading the useless paper dollars for things like Bitcoin. Anyways, I wanted to share that. We'll do maybe a few more site and chart specific videos as time goes on. If you guys have any comments of what you'd like to watch. Again, in our private group, we've been going over this stuff daily. So if you want to join that conversation, the links for that are down below. And we'll see you guys again on the next episode. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks for the support on all the previous videos.